white elitist pedophile ring off the coast of South Africa. It was reported that in the 1980s, high-ranking members of the white supremacist apartheid government were taking black boys to Bird Island to sexually abuse them. In 2018, a former officer with the South African government named Mark Minnie wrote a book exposing the Bird Island pedophile ring. Within 1 week of the book's release, Minnie was found dead and authorities ruled it a suicide, and all copies of the book was taken out of circulation.
Bird Island was the precursor to Epstein Island. So you might as well say that Bird Island and Epstein Island were pretty much sisters and brothers, or Bird Island was the grandfather or grandmother of Epstein Island.
And when we look in South Africa, during the period where we see apartheid at its height, we see one of the ministers, I believe he was the Minister of the Interior, very high-ranking person, a man by the name of Magnus, actually being one of the individuals that was able to have this Bird Island, this pedophile island, as a place that his closest friends, other wealthy Boers, other wealthy Europeans in South Africa could go and have their way with South Africans. And I almost said South African girls, but you better be clear that there were South African boys there too.
These people actually marshaled military helicopters to take young boys over to the island under the pretext that they would be teaching them new skills, hunting, fishing, manhood training, and the whole 9 yards. Came to find out that when they got there, they were trapped on the island and they had to do all kind of perverse acts with these people who were part of P.W. Botha's upper echelon.
They go to Africa and to the Caribbean and to Asia because they know that the forces of the dominant culture will not attack them for that. They will attack them if it's European. But what was interesting is that in this case, Jeff Epstein used to take European girls and bring them to the Caribbean to become part of it. He took them to places that were outside the United States of America, along with the entire crew that was part of that.
We hear a lot less about the fact that he literally had a private island that many people called Pedophile Island. Many people called it Pedophile Island. This was no secret. But the reason why he was able to get away with it is because it was actually in the Caribbean. We've heard about young girls of European descent being taken there and raped, but I truly believe that we're going to hear more about people who lived there who actually were also exploited. See, there's no value for black women and even less value for black girls. So when are we going to hear about the full story of what was happening there?
Jeffrey Epstein was an agent for Mossad. Jeffrey Epstein engaged in what was used to be called love traps. His business was love traps for the Mossad, sexual blackmail. So that's why all of these politicians and European royalty were scrambling when he got arrested. And that's why, of course, he was suicidal. He was killed in prison.
Epstein died in very peculiar circumstances. He was being monitored every 45 minutes. He virtually had none of the things that you would need to have in order to commit suicide, yet peculiarly, he was able to commit suicide. I think we should be clear that there are many people who are afraid that he might try to cut a deal.
The minute you walk into Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion, there's this huge painting of President Clinton in
Even though high-ranking pedophile rings run by the white supremacist elite are being exposed, people should still be more aware of the pedophile propaganda that's trickling down into the lives of the general masses.
They do the same things with the drag queen reading hour, where grown men dress up as women and they read to little children in schools. One of these circumstances in Texas was by a Mexican male who dressed up as a female, who was a convicted child predator.
In a project designed to combat homonegativity in the black community. Johns Hopkins University doled out $400,000 to a project that assessed adolescent black boys' satisfaction with anal penetration.
They're teaching children all the way in middle school and in certain kindergarten schools how to have anal sex, having these adults teach this, and then showing them how to put on condoms and all that in preschool for some children doing this little demonstration.
In California, a new bill was passed called SB 145, and many people have coined this the pedophile bill. This is because this law offers certain levels of protection to some pedophiles.
SB 145, you can be an 18 or 19-year-old boy and you can have sex with an 8-year-old boy as long as that 8-year-old boy feels that he is a girl or he has LGBT leanings.
We have to recognize that pedophiles actually prey on the powerless. And in most societies around the world, the most powerless are the Africans. Because of the remnants, because of the reality of the transatlantic enslavement trade and the continuing systems of white supremacy that are still working and are still alive and well. So that when we see people who are powerless, we're going to see ripe conditions for sexual abuse.
It's very important to understand the correlation between the buck-breaking techniques that were used during slavery and the scientific buck-breaking and social engineering and refined eugenics tactics that are being used on black people today.
Because a lot of black men, after slavery, they would have to work in the sex industry because they were providing sexual favors in slavery. So after slavery, a lot of them had to provide sexual favors and get into the sex work industry outside of slavery. And even today, a lot of black men who are LGBT, because they don't get any resources from the white LGBT community who uses them as mascots, they're reduced to working into the sex industry.
Black men and black people get a bum rap about being homophobic. You would think we killed Matthew Shepard. You would think a black guy shot up the Pulse nightclub down in Orlando. These are either white people or folks who are identified as honorary white that do this kind of stuff. The Jeffrey Dahmer, and there's this mass killer. Are you familiar with Ronald Dominique, white guy who's down in New Orleans and was just killing black men, killed maybe 25 black men, raped and killed them. You don't hear about it. And this, I'm certain this happens, like Ed Buckner. When these things happen, you can't kill black men and it matter. It's white homosexual man killing black men. That's not homophobic. A black man saying he wants his son to grow up straight like Kevin Hart, now he's a monster.
And there was a study done at UCLA to kind of assess just what size the black LGBT population was. It came out to be roughly about 4%, right, of black America. And yet, out of that population, there was basically one black trans person killed per year, some years. For black men, but most particularly heterosexual black men, it was about 200 to 300 per year. And that's being conservative based on what's reported, right? But you can see the kind of stratification of the data, but notice that nobody presents the data.
That stuff in Chicago that's supposed to be black folks killing each other out on the streets, not really. That idiot Lightfoot, also a LGBTQer, she gave funds for community development directly to Hispanic street gangs. That really displeased legitimate Hispanic leadership. And what happens is they used it apparently to buy guns from the broken in boxcars that were filled with arms, armed up, supplied up, and Hispanic street gangs are killing black kids. So black street gangs are killing brown kids. So the media puts it out as black on black crime when actually what it is black on brown crime, brown on black crime.
1966, the same Johns Hopkins University, they secretly opened a sex change clinic. A clinic that performed sex change operations, but look, this is the kicker, Brother Tariq. The inaugural patient, the first one who was scientifically transgender, was a black male named Avon Wilson.
At one point, you know, they were trying to get brothers to wear skirts in hip hop. And I feel like I was on the forefront, if not single-handedly, may have stopped that shit from happening. Because I started calling motherfuckers out. I called out Kanye West. I called out all these dudes. Omar Epps. Anybody that was wearing skirts out here was like, nah, that ain't cool. And so that trend didn't pass. It came real quick, and then it's gone. They'll probably try to bring it back at some time, but not while I'm around.
White feminists looked upon poor black women as their role models because they say they're the only women in America who are not trapped in the slavery of marriage. So how do they handle their macho, super masculine black men? We need to use that as a model to handle white men. So if we start with them, we can make the process so that young white boys want to be hip will try to be like they see black men do. So if we get black men jacked around, self-depreciating with no respect and glorifying dysfunction, we can get the white boys to do the same thing.
Dr. Henry Kissinger, who promoted this in 1974, that homosexuality should be promoted as a strategy or as an advantageous lifestyle in black communities, as a way to go towards depopulation, that he quoted in his National Security Study Memorandum 200, where he stated, quote, depopulation should be the highest priority of U.S. foreign policy towards the third world, end quote. But he also meant that for it to be domestic and local.
But if you think about how much we reproduce and then how much trouble they have reproducing. Like, how many white couples do you know, oh, we're going to in vitro, we have to have shots and all this because we're having trouble having a baby. So it's not just that we reproduce faster, stronger offspring, they have trouble reproducing.
So because we have so few black folk in the hood that are men, it's fairly easy to get to them and condition them to negativity. See, the thug, typical hood rat thug is a lesbian in a boy's body. Lesbians in the hood rat are raised like girls.
Black America is under an estrogen assault through our food, through our water, through the air we breathe. Air in black zip codes is very different from air in white zip codes. It's a fact.
I call it science of strategic extinction. It's the way that you deal with exterminating people or with a soft extermination. So you have to deal with either hard extermination, where you just come right out and start killing everybody and dealing with a complete pogrom, as they used to call it, or you essentially do soft eliminations. You deal with the food, you deal with the water, you deal with the air.
In eugenics, the major overall idea is to scientifically prove the inferiority of one gender, race, or population of a people, and to prove the superiority of another. So primarily this was dealing with the blonde hair, blue eye as superior. Everybody else is inferior. Number one, black. They did tests on rats. They did tests on babies. They did tests on children, grown men, etc. This is what justified the annihilation of people in Germany. This is what justified the annihilation of our brothers and sisters in the Congo, etc., etc., etc.
You could deal with eugenics by breaking down the different components of eugenics. How do you kill off people? How do you crop people? How do you marginalize their existence? You can do so by marginalizing their gender. So eugenics is not just about killing off the population. It's killing off the very means by which the population It generates.
If I make you a transgender, and you're doing man on man or woman on woman, boom, that stops reproduction. If we talk about transhumanism, which is basically we're now integrating with machines and all of that type of stuff. Well, if I'm integrated with a machine, the machine can easily be programmed for me not to reproduce. And then eugenics itself is about being selective about who you let reproduce.
The transgenderism, the basic word is trans. In other words, they're segueing you from one structure into another. And the more they segue you from transgenderism to transhumanism, the more they are putting you into control, a control grid. That control grid is AI. Okay, so that the end result of the beginning of any transitioning process is to place you into a whole new corridor, a whole new paradigm of control.
Every single administration since Nixon has engaged in curing the problem of black masculine hostility through two means: a carceral solution and a chemical solution. Carceral meaning mass incarceration. Nixon initiated the process of mass incarceration, which the black community suffers from today, mass incarceration and mass drugging.
After World War II, technology began to boom, and the ideas behind advancing technology was to eliminate human participation. We are at a stage now where technology and artificial intelligence can remove all necessary human participation in pretty much about everything. So the surplus humans are no longer necessary, and the plan is to get rid of at least 5 billion people.
60% of the groceries you would buy at a grocery store, 60% have been bio-infused with soy isolate. Why? Because they first piloted this in the prisons, infusing prison food with soy because they discovered soy is a great feminizer. Soy, when ingested, becomes estrogenic, the female hormone estrogen. So you eat a lot of soy, males start developing man breasts or man boobs.
Incarceration. You have a lot of brothers and even sisters who go behind what we call the G wall, right? They go behind the wall and they don't come out the same. You know, think about brothers and sisters who've been locked up for 10 years, 20 years, and the things that they witness from being inside. You know, sometimes your cell might be raided, or if you get into it and you get on the wrong side of the guard, you're in lockdown where you can only come out for 1 hour, right? And then you're locked down for 23 hours. Sometimes the entire jail is locked down. So it's a lot of buck breaking happening right in the penal system.
The LGBT